My stepdad bribed my little brother to report my mom to CPS, so I collected evidence and destroyed his life. 6 months later, he came crawling back, claiming he just wanted to apologize. Growing up, there was only one thing that my mom forced me to do: screenshot every text message. It didn't matter if it was an argument with a friend or a text with classmates about homework. At the end of every day, I had to send them to her, and she would organize them into a huge database that she kept on her computer. She had them all in organized folders, sorted by person, place, time, and date. My little brother Noah had to do it too, starting from when he got his first phone at 10. But my mom was the type to drop me off at my friends' houses and refuse to drive away until she saw me walk in, to binge watch those documentaries about catching kitty fiddlers. So it's not like this was exactly out of character. But then I started to notice something. Every time my stepdad Trent called her a W word and accused her of cheating, she'd whip out the text screenshots like it was a loaded gun. March 4th, 3:28 p.m. Here is me telling my coworker that I'm in a relationship. And instead of apologizing, or even just nodding his head, Trent would clench his fists. It was like he wanted a reason to get mad. Another time, while my mom was showering, Trent started accusing me. He asked me where I was last Saturday. I was shopping with Mom. I know you're covering up for your idiot mother, he interrupted before raising his fist to wail on me. And just as I braced for impact, my mom stormed in. Wait, she said, before showing him texts between us planning to go to the mall, as well as a conversation with her sister about how funny it was that we ran into her at, the mall. Trent grunted and walked away. She tried to lie to me and tell me that Trent suffered from low blood sugar, which makes him lose control of himself. But I knew that if it wasn't for that screenshot to keep me safe, I would have ended up in school the next day with a black eye. But instead of confronting her, I plastered on the most naive face I could muster and smiled. "Oh, okay. You and Trent are so cute together," I exclaimed. You see, I wanted to know exactly what Trent was up to, and I knew that by playing dumb, my mom wouldn't try to hide anything from me. But not even the screenshots or constant tiptoeing could stop the bruises. I still remember the first time I noticed something was wrong. We were in the middle of playing Mario Kart, and I raised my hand to celebrate once I won. But as soon as I did that, I saw my mom flinch. It was only for a split second, but still, it was there. The next day, I saw the unmistakable sight of yellow and green bruises all along her arm when her sleeve accidentally fell. My heart broke, and I was instantly filled with the familiar feeling of hatred towards my biological father. You see, when they were still together, my mom used to work as a receptionist at his dental practice. And outside of that, she would do all the motherly duties. It was the perfect setup until he abandoned us for one of his clients and started a new family, that is. And since my mom signed a prenup, he left us with nothing. Trent came into the picture a few months later, and they got married within just weeks of meeting each other. Me and my mom were both convinced he was different until he started on his BS. But all this meant that my mom couldn't just leave him. So now we were stuck. For a while, I just focused on becoming a second parent in the house, protecting Noah, subtly comforting my mom in ways that wouldn't show that I knew what was going on. Because if he wanted to collect our texts, then I'd make sure he'd never text again. And it all started with me licking his A. Whenever he'd yell at my mom, I'd text him and start a conversation about what a useless piece of shit she is. Whenever he thought my mom was cheating, I affirmed to him that he deserved better. And he ate it up every single time. So much so that he stopped asking to see my texts because he didn't want to get caught for what he was saying. And he stopped yelling at Noah too. He thought we were both on his side. I was fast asleep at 2 a.m. when I heard a glass smash to pieces in the kitchen. I shot up and ran down the stairs. What I saw made me nauseous. Trent, holding one of the pieces of glass over my mom's head. "I wouldn't do that if I was you," my voice painfully condescending. "I've been recording everything you've been doing for the last year. All the bruises, the texts, the shouting, and they've all been sent to my friend's dad, who's a lawyer." He stopped in his tracks. My mom looked at me with a mix of awe and sadness. I just have low blood sugar," he stammered. The thought of being outed hit him like a brick. Trent left that night with 2 suitcases and a promise that this wasn't over. But it was. The restraining order was filed within 48 hours. The divorce papers, a week later. The screenshot rule ended the day Trent moved out too. And after just 6 months of peace, we got a knock at the door. It wasn't Trent. It was CPS. My little brother Noah had reported my mom to his guidance counselor under the guidance of Trent. They had secretly been in contact the whole time. Trent poisoning my brother's mind with lies about how mom was the real abuser, how the screenshots were her way of controlling us, how he'd tried to save us but we wouldn't let him. The CPS worker stood at our door with a thick folder and a stern expression. She introduced herself as Margaret and said she needed to speak with all of us separately. My mom's face went white. Noah wouldn't even look at us, just stared at his shoes like they were the most interesting things in the world. Margaret sat up in our living room, pulling out forms and a recording device. She explained that serious allegations had been made about emotional abuse and neglect. My stomach dropped. This was Trent's doing. I knew it immediately. The way Noah kept fidgeting with his phone, glancing at it every few seconds, told me everything I needed to know. They interviewed Mom first while Noah and I waited in the kitchen. I tried to talk to him, but he just shrugged and went to his room. I could hear muffled voices from the living room, my mom's getting higher and more stressed with each passing minute. When it was my turn, Margaret asked me about the screenshot rule, about whether I felt controlled or monitored. I explained it was for our safety, that Mom had always been protective, but I could tell she wasn't fully buying it. Noah's interview lasted the longest, almost 2 hours. When he came out, his eyes were red and he went straight to his room again. Margaret told us she'd need to do a home inspection and would be back tomorrow. She also said that based on the severity of the allegations, my mom might need to stay elsewhere temporarily while they investigated. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how Noah had been acting weird for weeks, always on his phone, being secretive, spending more time in his room. I'd assumed it was just preteen stuff, but now it all made sense. I waited until I heard Mom crying in her room, then I snuck into Noah's room. He was awake, texting someone. When he saw me, he quickly hid his phone under his pillow. I sat on his bed and asked him what was really going on. He said nothing, that I wouldn't understand. I pushed harder, told him I knew Trent was involved. His face crumbled a little, but he still wouldn't talk. I asked to borrow his phone to check the time, making up some excuse about mine being dead. He hesitated, but handed it over. While pretending to look at the clock, I quickly opened his messages. What I saw made my blood boil. Dozens of messages from an unknown number, but I recognized Trent's way of writing immediately. The messages went back months. Trent had been coaching Noah on exactly what to say, what to report, how to make it believable. He'd told Noah that Mom was dangerous, that she was the real abuser, that the screenshots were her way of controlling us. He'd twisted every protective thing she'd ever done into something sinister. I screenshotted as many messages as I could before Noah grabbed his phone back. He started yelling at me to get out, that I was just like Mom, always snooping. I told him Trent was using him, manipulating him, but Noah just pushed me out of his room and locked the door. The next morning, Margaret returned with another social worker. They went through our house, checking our rooms, looking in the fridge, examining everything. Mom had to pack a bag. The plan was for her to stay with her sister while Noah and I remained in the house with daily check-ins. Watching her leave with that small suitcase was one of the hardest things I'd ever seen. Our Aunt Kelly arrived an hour later. She tried to act normal, making us sandwiches and asking about school, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She kept checking her phone, probably texting Mom updates. Noah stayed in his room most of the day, only coming out for meals. That night, I went through my own phone, looking for any evidence that might help. I found old screenshots I'd taken of Trent's abusive texts to me, the ones where he'd ranted about Mom. I'd kept them in a hidden folder, just in case. I also remembered that I'd set up an automatic backup to the cloud months ago, paranoid that Trent might try to delete evidence from my phone. The next day at school was torture. I couldn't focus on anything. During lunch, I was heading to the library when I saw something that made me stop cold. Noah was sitting outside with Trent. They were at a picnic table near the parking lot, Trent handing him what looked like a gift bag. This was supposed to be impossible. The restraining order should have prevented this. I ducked behind a tree and started recording with my phone. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Trent's animated gestures, the way he kept touching Noah's shoulder. Noah was nodding along, even smiling sometimes. After about 15 minutes, Trent left, and Noah headed back into school. I confronted Noah after school, showing him the video. He got defensive, said Trent just wanted to check on him, that he was worried. I reminded him about the restraining order, that Trent wasn't supposed to be within 500 feet of any of us. Noah said I didn't understand, that Trent was the only one who really cared about him. That's when he let slip about the gaming setup. Trent had promised to buy him the new PlayStation and a whole gaming computer if he stuck to their story. He'd been showing Noah pictures of all the stuff he'd buy him once Mom was out of the picture. I felt sick. Trent was literally buying my brother's testimony. I told Aunt Kelly everything that night. She was furious, immediately calling Mom's lawyer. But we needed more proof than just my word and a video of them sitting together. We needed to show the pattern of manipulation, the coaching, the bribes. The next CPS visit was scheduled for Thursday. Margaret would be interviewing us again, this time with a child psychologist present. I spent the days before gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I went through Noah's room while he was at school, finding gift cards hidden in his desk drawer, all purchased by Trent. I took photos of everything. I also discovered Noah had a second phone. It was an old one, hidden in a shoebox in his closet. This must have been how he was communicating with Trent without anyone knowing. The phone was locked, but I knew Noah's usual passwords. After a few tries, I got in. The messages on this phone were even worse. Trent had been meeting Noah at school regularly, not just that one time I'd seen. He'd been filling Noah's head with lies about Mom planning to send him to military school, about how she never wanted a son, only a daughter. He played on every insecurity Noah had. One message thread made me especially angry. Trent had convinced Noah that once Mom was gone, I'd turn on him too, that I was only pretending to care about him to look good for Mom. That's why Noah had been so distant with me lately. Trent had isolated him from everyone who actually loved him. I backed up everything from that phone to my cloud storage, every message, every photo Trent had sent of the gifts he'd buy, every lie he'd told. I also found voice messages where Trent coached Noah on exactly what to say to CPS, making him practice his lines like it was a school play. When Thursday came, I was ready. But first, I needed to get through to Noah. I cornered him before Margaret arrived, showing him the messages where Trent talked about him like he was just a tool to use against Mom. Messages where Trent called him easy to manipulate and not too bright, perfect for this plan. Noah's face changed as he read. I could see the hurt creeping in, the realization that Trent didn't actually care about him, but he was in too deep. He said it didn't matter, that he'd already told CPS everything and couldn't take it back now. I told him it's never too late to tell the truth. Margaret arrived with the psychologist, Dr. Chen. They set up in the living room again. This time they said they wanted to interview us together first, then separately. Aunt Kelly had to wait in the kitchen. As we sat down, I could see Noah's hands shaking. Margaret started with general questions about our daily routines, about how things had been since Mom left. Noah gave short answers, sticking to the script Trent had given him. But when Dr. Chen asked about our relationship with Trent, I saw my opening. I pulled out my phone and said I had something they needed to see. Margaret looked skeptical but nodded. I showed them the screenshots of Trent's messages to me from months ago, the ones where he called Mom horrible names and tried to turn me against her. Then I showed them the video of him meeting Noah at school, violating the restraining order. Noah tried to interrupt, saying I was making things up, but I kept going. I told them about the second phone, about the coaching, about the bribes. I played one of the voice messages where Trent was literally telling Noah what words to use when talking to CPS. Margaret's expression changed changed from skeptical to concerned. Then I dropped the biggest bombshell. I told them to ask Noah about what Trent had said would happen if he didn't cooperate. Noah went pale. He started stammering that it wasn't true, that Trent never threatened anything. But Dr. Chen gently pressed him, using some psychology technique that made Noah feel safe. Finally, Noah broke. He started crying, real sobbing like I hadn't seen since he was little. He admitted that Trent had told him Mom would go to jail if he didn't help, that we'd be separated and put in different foster homes, that it would be all Noah's fault for not saving us from her. The threats had gotten more elaborate over time, with Trent describing in detail how awful foster care would be. Margaret immediately stopped the interview to make some calls. Dr. Chen stayed with us, talking to Noah in a calm voice about how none of this was his fault, how adults who manipulate children are the ones who are wrong, not the kids who believe them. Noah just kept crying, apologizing over and over. Within an hour, everything had changed. The CPS investigation pivoted completely. Now they were investigating Trent for witness tampering, child manipulation, and violating a restraining order. They called Mom's lawyer, who arrived quickly with a stack of documentation about Trent's history. Mom was allowed to come home that night. When she walked through the door, Noah ran to her, sobbing apologies into her shoulder. She just held him, tears streaming down her own face, telling him it wasn't his fault. I joined the hug, and we stood there in our doorway, finally together again. But Trent wasn't done. The next day, he showed up at our school claiming there was a family emergency. He told the office he needed to pick up Noah for a medical appointment. Luckily, I'd already thought of this possibility. That morning, I'd gone to the principal with Aunt Kelly and explained the situation. We'd provided copies of the restraining order and made sure all staff knew Trent was not allowed near Noah. Security stopped him at the office. He tried to argue, saying he had joint custody rights from when he was married to Mom. He made a scene, yelling about his rights as a father figure. But the school resource officer was already on his way. I watched from my classroom window as they escorted Trent off campus. That afternoon, Mom's lawyer, Rebecca, came to the house. She explained that Trent's claim of custody rights was complete nonsense. The divorce had been finalized with no custody arrangements because he had no biological or legal claim to us. She'd already filed additional charges for his attempted violation of the restraining order at school. Noah had to write a statement about everything that had happened. I sat with him as he typed, stopping every few minutes when he'd start crying again. He detailed how Trent had first contacted him through a gaming platform, pretending to just be checking in, how the conversation slowly shifted to complaints about Mom, then to outright lies. He wrote about the gifts, the promises, the threats, how Trent had made him delete certain messages but Noah had forgotten about some of them, how scared he'd been that our family would be destroyed if he didn't do what Trent said, how guilty he felt for believing the lies about Mom. The final CPS hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, we had security cameras installed and changed all our locks. Mom took time off work to be home with us. We started family therapy, all three of us sitting in a circle and talking about everything that had happened. The therapist helped us understand how predators like Trent operated, how they identified vulnerabilities and exploited them, how they isolated their victims and made them feel like they had no choice. Noah learned that what happened to him was a form of abuse, even though Trent never physically hurt him. As the hearing approached, we prepared ourselves. Rebecca coached us on what to expect, how to answer questions clearly and honestly. She said the evidence was overwhelming in our favor, but we still needed to be ready for anything Trent might try to pull. The night before the hearing, none of us could sleep. We ended up in the living room, watching old movies and eating popcorn like we used to before Trent. Mom fell asleep on the couch with her arms around both of us. For the first time in years, I felt like we were really safe. The hearing itself was less dramatic than I'd expected. Margaret presented her report, which detailed Trent's systematic manipulation of Noah. Dr. Chen testified about the psychological impact of what Trent had done. Rebecca presented all the evidence we'd gathered, the messages, the recordings, the documentation of bribes and threats. Trent's lawyer tried to argue that he was just a concerned stepfather trying to protect the children. But when they played the recording of him coaching Noah on exactly what lies to tell CPS, that defense fell apart. The judge looked disgusted as she listened to Trent describing how to make the abuse allegations sound believable. In the end, the ruling was swift and decisive. Mom was completely cleared of all allegations. The judge commended her for the protective measures she'd taken, noting that the screenshot rule, while unusual, had actually provided crucial evidence of Trent's pattern of abuse. The CPS case was closed with a finding of no abuse or neglect by Mom, but it didn't end there. The judge recommended criminal charges against Trent for witness tampering, child manipulation, and violating a protective order. She issued a permanent restraining order that included specific language about no contact through third parties or electronic means. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. Trent's face as the ruling was read was something I'll never forget. The mask finally slipped completely, and we could all see the rage underneath, but he couldn't do anything about it. Court officers stood ready to intervene if he made any sudden moves. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, probably telling him not to make things worse. As we left the courthouse, Noah held Mom's hand tightly. He'd been so brave during his testimony, clearly stating how Trent had manipulated him, how sorry he was for believing the lies, how he never wanted to see Trent again. The judge had praised his courage in telling the truth. The criminal case against Trent moved forward over the next few months. We had to testify again, but this time we were ready. Trent was eventually convicted on multiple charges. The judge, in sentencing, spoke about how using a child as a weapon in a domestic abuse situation was particularly heinous, how the psychological damage could last a lifetime. Trent got 5 years in prison and would have to register as a child abuser when he got out. The day he was sentenced, we didn't celebrate. We just went home and had a quiet dinner together. Noah had written a victim impact statement that the prosecutor read in court. The criminal trial was set for 3 months out. Rebecca told us to expect Trent to try something before before then. She was right. 2 weeks later, I was walking home from school when a car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and this woman I'd never seen before leaned out. She said she was Trent's sister, and that he just wanted to apologize, that he was sorry for everything and had written me a letter. I kept walking, pulling out my phone to record. She followed me for 2 blocks, getting more aggressive. Said I was being a brat, that family helps family, that I owed it to Trent to hear him out. I called Mom and put her on speaker. The woman heard Mom's voice and drove off fast. We got her license plate and reported it immediately. Turns out Trent had been calling his family from jail, spinning some story about being falsely accused. His sister had driven 3 hours to find me. Rebecca got the judge to expand the restraining order to include any contact through family members. The sister got a warning from police about harassment. Noah was doing better in therapy but still struggled with trust. He'd installed 3 different authentication apps on his phone, paranoid about anyone accessing his messages. He'd also become super protective of his privacy, which we respected. The therapist said it was a normal response to having his trust violated so badly. One day Noah came home from school really upset. Some kid had found out about the trial and was spreading rumors, saying Noah had tried to get his mom arrested, calling him a snitch. Mom went to the school the next day and shut that down real quick. The kid got suspended for bullying, and Noah's teachers started keeping a closer eye on things. We had to prep for the trial testimony. The prosecutor, a woman named Dana, was really good with Noah. She explained everything that would happen, where everyone would sit, what kinds of questions to expect. She said Trent's lawyer might try to make Noah feel bad, but to just tell the truth and everything would be okay. I had to testify too about finding the messages and recording Trent at school. Dana coached me on staying calm and just stating facts. She said Trent's lawyer might try to make me seem like a manipulative teenager who turned her brother against his stepfather, but the evidence would speak for itself. Mom was the most nervous about testifying. Having to relive everything in front of Trent made her physically sick. She'd have panic attacks thinking about it. Her therapist prescribed some anxiety medication to help her get through it. Rebecca promised to be right there in the courtroom for support. A week before trial, Trent's lawyer contacted Rebecca about a plea deal. He'd plead guilty to violating the restraining order if they dropped the child manipulation charges. Rebecca laughed and said no way. We had him dead to rights and weren't backing down. The lawyer tried to argue that prison would ruin Trent's life. Rebecca said he should have thought of that before targeting a child. The night before trial, we stayed at a hotel near the courthouse. None of us wanted to risk being late because of traffic. We ordered room service and watched comedy shows, trying to distract ourselves. Noah fell asleep between me and Mom on the bed, holding both our hands like he used to when he was really little. The courthouse was intimidating. Big marble floors and serious-looking people everywhere. We had to go through metal detectors and security was tight. Dana met us in a conference room to go over last-minute stuff. She said Trent had been transported from jail and was already in the courtroom with his lawyer. Walking into that courtroom and seeing Trent for the first time in months was surreal. He'd lost weight and his hair was shorter. He tried to make eye contact with Noah, but the bailiff told him to face forward. His lawyer looked tired, like he knew this was a losing case but had to try anyway. The prosecutor's opening statement laid out everything clearly. How Trent had systematically groomed Noah over months. How he'd used gifts and threats to turn a child against his mother. How he'd violated a restraining order multiple times to continue his manipulation. She called it a deliberate campaign of psychological abuse. Trent's lawyer tried to paint him as a concerned stepfather who went too far. Said he genuinely believed Mom was abusive and was trying to protect Noah. That the gifts were just normal step-parent stuff and the meetings were misunderstandings. It was such obvious BS that some jury members actually rolled their eyes. Mom testified first. She was shaking, but her voice stayed steady. She talked about the abuse during their marriage, showing photos of bruises, explained the screenshot rule and how it had protected us, described finding out Noah had reported her to CPS and the devastation of being separated from her kids. Trent's lawyer tried to twist things, but Mom held firm. When it was Noah's turn, I could see how scared he was, but he did amazing. He explained exactly how Trent had contacted him, how the manipulation had escalated. He read from his statement about the threats Trent made, about being told Mom would go to jail and we'd be separated forever. His voice broke a few times, but he kept going. The prosecutor played the recordings of Trent coaching Noah. The courtroom was dead silent except for Trent's voice telling an 11-year-old exactly how to lie to CPS. You could see the jury's faces change as they listened. One woman looked like she wanted to jump over the barrier and strangle Trent herself. I testified about finding the evidence and documenting everything. Trent's lawyer tried to make me look like some scheming teenager who manipulated her little brother, but when Dana showed all the screenshots and recordings on redirect, his argument fell apart. The evidence was too overwhelming to dispute. The worst part was when they played a jail phone call. Trent didn't know it was being recorded and was talking to some friend about his plan. He literally said Noah was dumb enough to believe anything, and that he'd had that kid wrapped around his finger. Noah started crying, and Mom had to take him out to the hallway. Trent's defense was pathetic. His lawyer called character witnesses who barely knew him, tried to introduce doubt about the authenticity of the messages, but Dana destroyed every argument. She showed metadata proving when messages were sent, had experts verify the voice recordings, made it clear this was deliberate, calculated abuse. When Trent himself testified, it was a disaster for him. He tried to play victim, saying we'd all turned against him, but when Dana cross-examined him, he lost his temper, started ranting about how Mom had poisoned us against him, how he was just trying to save Noah. He actually admitted to meeting Noah at school but claimed it was justified. His lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Child endangerment, witness tampering, multiple violations of a restraining order, harassment. When they read the verdict, Trent's face went white. He turned to look at us and mouthed something, but the bailiff stepped between us. Sentencing was a month later. Noah wrote a victim impact statement that made everyone cry. cry. He talked about losing his trust in adults, about the nightmares, about feeling guilty for betraying his family, about how Trent had taken advantage of a kid who just wanted a father figure. The judge let Noah read it himself, which was incredibly brave. Mom's statement focused on the fear of losing her children, how Trent had weaponized her love for us against her, how she'd had to watch her baby boy be manipulated by someone who was supposed to protect him. She talked about the ongoing therapy costs, the security measures, the constant anxiety that Trent might find another way to hurt us. I wrote about watching my family fall apart, about having to pretend to support Trent to protect everyone, about the guilt of not catching on sooner to what he was doing to Noah, about learning that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like stepdads who bring pizza and play video games. The judge gave Trent 5 years, said using a child as a weapon in domestic abuse was unconscionable, that the psychological damage he'd inflicted was as serious as physical abuse. She ordered him to have no contact with any of us for life, including through third parties. Any violation would mean immediate return to prison. Trent tried to say something as they led him away, but his lawyer shut him up. His family was in the gallery, and his mom was crying. I felt bad for her. Finding out your son is a predator must be awful, but she'd raised him, and somewhere along the way, something had gone very wrong. After sentencing, we went to Rebecca's office to finalize some paperwork. She was setting up a trust for Noah with money from a victim's compensation fund. It would help pay for his therapy and maybe college someday. She also helped Mom file for a name change for all of us. We wanted our mom's maiden name, a fresh start completely free of any connection to Trent. The next few months were about healing. We painted the whole house, choosing bright colors that felt nothing like when Trent lived there. Noah picked lime green for his room, which was hideous but made him happy. We adopted a rescue dog who barked at any man who came near the house, which honestly made us all feel safer. Noah's coding project turned into something real. He entered it in a school competition and won second place. Mom graduated from her paralegal program with honors. Rebecca hired her immediately, saying she needed someone who understood domestic abuse from personal experience. Mom's first case was helping another woman whose ex was trying to turn her kids against her. She came home crying that night, but they were good tears.